What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content they watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the December 27, 2021 edition of Raw Talk. This time being hosted by Matt Camp and filling in for Jackie Redmond this week, Scott Stanford. Not sure if Redmond was out due to the whole COVID outbreak that happened in WWE this past week. A number of top stars, notable names missing from the show this week. Liv Morgan, Becky Lynch, Big E, Seth Rollins, Bobby Lashley, Austin Theory. Finn Balor wasn't there, but I don't think that was due to the COVID stuff. I think he was supposed to face Austin Theory this week. And Balor was at the MSG house show on Sunday, as was Omos, and Omos wasn't on Raw on Monday, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But either way, Jackie Redmond missed Raw Talk this week, filling in for her, like I said, Scott Stanford. And they didn't really have a lot to recap, as Raw was kind of a throwaway show due to all the absences and all the rewrites and whatever. So at least in this case, it wasn't entirely WWE's fault. They then recapped the Damian Priest-Dolph Ziggler match that saw Priest get himself disqualified, and although retained the United States Championship, Ziggler won by DQ. They noted that Ziggler was injured by Priest in the process, so Ziggler is supposed to be the heel here, and it looked like Priest had turned heel like he did at Survivor Series, and he got booed for it, which was weird at the time. I thought the match was fine, the finish was lame. They did say here that they did that, very likely, to set up a match for next week. So they announced for next Monday, if Ziggler is cleared to compete in storyline, he will get one more shot at Damian Priest for the United States Championship, with no DQs, no countouts. And I think I think there are DQs and countouts. I think if Priest had gotten himself counted out or DQ'd, he's going to lose the United States Championship. I think that's actually what it is. Either way, assuming the match goes on as planned, it's going to be going down next Monday for the United States Championship. Matt Camp gives Ziggler the experience advantage, says he's been around the block, he's been in this situation before. I don't know if he picks Ziggler outright, but he does think Ziggler has more of an advantage than some might think going into that match next week. They then recap the Riddle and Otis match, or the Riddle and Gable match, rather, the Randy Orton and Otis match as well, that saw both members of RK Bro emerge victorious in their respective singles matches. Matt Camp says they're really clicking as a team right now, the Raw Tag Team Champions, and he feels the momentum, they're kind of riding that wave of momentum going into the Raw Tag Team title defense against the Mysterios at Day 1 this Saturday. I believe it's official for the pay-per-view, if I'm not mistaken. And he says also that Orton respects that drive in Riddle, although they're kind of on two separate sides of the spectrum, and that Orton's more of a serious guy, Riddle's a goof. He respects that in-ring drive in Riddle, and that's why they've meshed well together so far as Raw Tag Team Champions. They then recap the Mysterios versus the Profits from Monday's Raw. I'm sorry, it's not the Mysterios. I completely forgot. It's the Profits that won that match, not Rey and Dominic. The Profits are the next number one contenders to the Raw Tag Team titles. So they recap that match, the finals of the RK Bronament from Monday's Raw. Great match, I thought. Very fun match while it lasted. The Profits won and are now going to be facing, I believe, RK Bro at the pay-per-view on Saturday for the tag team titles. So we hear very briefly from the Profits backstage, kind of do their usual shtick with Kevin Patrick. Montez Ford says, listen, we never lost the Raw Tag Team titles, which is true. When they were the Raw Tag Team champions for a good stretch of 2020, they were drafted to SmackDown and never technically lost the championships. They kind of had to swap the titles with the New Day, so they have that story going for them going into that match on Saturday. And then they chant relentlessly, "We want the smoke," and Kevin Patrick joins in, and he kind of yells it with them, which is great. He really gets into it, and then he stops, and they kind of call him out on his shit, which was funny. I love Kevin Patrick. The guy's just great in his role. So from there, they welcome on this week's analyst, that being Booker T, who favors the Profits winning the tag team titles when that match happens. And he also feels that Matt Riddle has been a great fit for Orton. They kind of balance each other out very, very well. He says, as for Orton, he has mellowed out over the years, but he has always been the same in the ring as far as being that, having that drive, being the same intense competitor when that bell rings is Randy Orton. They then replay the wedding segment that saw Miz and Maurice renew their wedding vows at the end of Raw this week. That saw also Eric Bischoff serve as the officiator, or whatever the term is, whatever the correct term is. Edge came out, obviously interrupted the whole thing, brewed bath for Miz, Maurice, and even including Bischoff as well. I didn't know he was affected. I wasn't exactly paying attention to him. I mean, maybe they didn't even show him on camera, but when they did the brood bath, Bischoff was still in the ring. He actually got drowsed in whatever that liquid was. It definitely wasn't blood. It was some like poop-colored shit on. And it wasn't poop, obviously, because they kind of insinuated that was the case with AJ Lee and Ziggler and Cena almost a decade ago. That was full-on brown. This was like black or something. Edge had mentioned, or Gangrel had mentioned on a podcast a while ago, they can't use actual, like, not obviously real blood, but even liquid that looks like blood, which is incredibly dumb, but I think that's just the PG rating now, which is why they did the poop-colored shit, no pun intended, 10 years ago with Cena, Ziggler, and AJ, was because they can't use actual blood anymore, which, again, is dumb, but whatever, I guess, given the PG rating. So we actually hear from Bischoff here in Raw Talk, which was cool. A nice little get for the show. He says that he should not have been surprised about how things turned out, which is why he expected someone to interrupt. And obviously he's been involved with wrestling weddings before, that being the 3-minute warning wedding of Billy and Chuck from almost 20 years ago. He was involved in that as the priest and took off the mask, and one of the greatest wedding reveals in WWE history was that moment with Bischoff on SmackDown back in 2002. He also says here that he got teary-eyed when Miz spoke French to Maurice. He then plugs his 83 Weeks podcast, which he says by name because I think it was Megan, I think, that was talking to Bischoff, not Kevin. And, she had mentioned, oh, what are you up to nowadays? How are you keeping yourself busy? And he's got a lot of projects. He was actually, I think, on just Dynamite recently. Bischoff has gone back and forth. I mean, he hasn't really appeared a bunch for WWE at all, but he did appear recently for Dynamite in AEW, which is kind of funny, but he obviously didn't mention that. But he did plug the 83 Weeks podcast of his, which was cool. And then he said that he was done officiating weddings after this. So great to see Eric Bischoff here in Raw Talk. Wasn't expecting that. I thought he played his role well on Raw. Great to see him on Raw Talk. Always great to see Bischoff in general pop up here and there. We then hear from MVP backstage at Raw Talk alongside Kevin Patrick. And MVP says that Lashley, we didn't hear from him this week a lot like we did from Big E and Rollins, because Lashley is a man of action. He doesn't speak. He's a man of action. And come day one, he will regain the WWE Championship and reestablish the almighty era. He then asks Kevin to make a pick for the match on Saturday, and Kevin Patrick says, well, I got to be impartial. And then MVP says, well, I'm going to tell Bobby Lashley that, so not exactly a great night for Kevin Patrick. Then to close out the show, Booker T says that Roman Reigns, they talk about the Roman Reigns-Brock Lesnar Universal Championship match of the pay-per-view as well. Probably because there really wasn't a lot to talk about from Monday's Raw, so they get into the SmackDown stuff, and I don't think there's a Talking Smack this week because there's no SmackDown. And the pay-per-view's on Saturday itself. Maybe they will do a Talking Smack. I see no reason to because there's no SmackDown on Friday. It's like a best-of special or whatever, I think on Fox or FS1 or whatever, like the top 10 moments of the year. So that's why they kind of got into the SmackDown stuff here. But Booker said that Roman has been dominant for the better part of the past year or two. And he calls him intimidating, but he can't intimidate Brock Lesnar. As for the WWE Championship match, he calls Kevin Owens a dark horse. Doesn't say that he's necessarily going to win. I think they mentioned that Big E's got to retain the title. Big spot for Big E. He's got to walk out the champion. But he calls Kevin Owens a dark horse. Says it's going to be a great fatal four-way before Matt Camp picks Roman Reigns to win in the Universal Championship match. So that was Raw Talk for December 27, 2021. Great to hear from Bischoff. And I thought they did a nice job of kind of filling in the blanks because Raw, obviously, with a lot of the roster being out, wasn't overly newsworthy this week. But they made the most of it. Had a decent Raw Talk here. And again, like I said, great to see Eric Bischoff pop up as well, making this episode a bit more notable than usual. Hearing more from Bischoff here than we did on Raw itself. So that's about it, folks, for the December 27, 2021 edition of Raw Talk. Appreciate you guys checking out the review. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Hitting the bell button as well to be notified every time a new video goes up. Stay tuned again, as I always say, for more interviews, reviews, Q&A videos, live reactions right here on the channel in the days to come as we head into the new year. Have a great final week of 2021, folks. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.